it really
That's good to
can
hear.
make a difference. Real, regular people coming in and talking.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also email or write, if you go on the website of the general court, which is the legislature, you can find links to bills. You can sign in support of a bill or in opposition to a bill. You can email the committee, you can email your state reps. There's a lot of ways to let your voice be heard.
Do you get many emails or phone calls or?
A lot of emails. I don't get a lot of phone calls, but
Mm-hmm.
I publish my phone number. It's there, and if
Yeah.
somebody calls me and leaves me a message, I will call them back. I want to talk to people.
I've gotten some phone calls, a lot of emails, and spoken to a lot of people, teachers, school board members, and but that's what I want to throw out there too. It's like, even though we're not in the position to intervene with what happens in the school, but we are. I'd love to get input from the select board, the school board, teachers. I want to make myself open to that. So if they have any concerns or whatever, or any ideas, that's what we do. That's what we need. We need that input so we can, that we're legislature. So that's, if there's something that we can put in place that'll help any issues that they see. I mean, the more information we get, it's been helpful. Like I've received so much information, and I'm gonna start working in the direction of some of those things soon. But it's definitely so. Whoever's listening, reach out if you have any concerns, any ideas, any thoughts, as far as the schools are concerned.
I know we're supposed to have a meeting with our school board sometime.
Mhm.
Is it this
Yeah.
month or?
Yeah, I think we were talking May,
Oh,
I believe.
you might. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Greenville Board of Selectmen are not interested in attending.
Hmm.
So it's gonna be the school board and our Board of Selectmen. I
And
think
that'll be a
maybe you,
public.
if you wanted to go.
Be a
Yeah.
public meeting, so anyone
Yeah.
will be welcome to that.
There's also, I'll let people know that the filing period for legislation happens once a year. And for last year, it was November, December. In the coming year, I think it's probably starts in September, October, so it's a little bit earlier for the second year of the biennium. But that's kind of a small window of opportunity for us to introduce legislation. And so, I've had occasions where people came to me and they said, I see a problem. I see that the law needs to be changed. And this particular one I'm thinking of was about parental notification. I have another bill that actually has got a hearing with the Senate tomorrow about foster homes and vaccination requirements in foster homes. So somebody brings a problem to you, and crafting legislation can be a little bit of an intricate process, but if you bring those ideas to us, we can talk about potentially getting them on the docket for next year. And so, the car inspection thing, you can't bring up a bill that's substantially the same in the second year if it didn't pass the first year.
And that's
But
just
you
house
could-
rules, or is that in
Yes.
ours?
Yes, but you could potentially bring up something that's different enough, like, rust smaller than, such and such a size is not a valid reason for failing somebody on an inspection, for example.
You could do that?
As
I
opposed
believe
to-
so. It would ultimately be the ruling of the speaker as to whether or not it's substantially the same. But to me, that would be different enough. It's not the exact same.
There'd be a lot of happy teenagers. But that's kind of a lighthearted issue in
Yeah.
some ways.
Well, but I remember talking to, I think his name is Sean. They run a butchering operation
Oh, yeah.
here, and he was telling me about some of the red tape that they run into.
Yeah.
And I've got that conversation in my head, thinking
Yeah.
that may be legislation that we need to bring next year, is to try to get rid of some of the crazy rules that keep people from just going about living their lives in a sensible
Yeah.
way. So, that it's those kinds of conversations that sort of ultimately prompt people to then go and file legislation and hopefully hopefully get it passed and make people's lives better. So.
And on a not so light note, something that happened, I think it was 2 years ago, at an executive counselors meeting where there was 9 people arrested, and one of them was a resident of New Ipswich.
Emily.
What was her name?
Emily?
Oh,
Like
So-
Emily Neal?
but that to me was stunning, because as far as I could see, and of course I wasn't there, so I don't know, but these people just went and were silently protesting what the executive council and the governor were doing.
I think
And they
one
were-
person said amen, so that certainly
But they were,
calls for arrest.
but they were arrested, and the circumstances around that thing was, to me, it was frightening. I don't know. Is there any talk of that at the State House? Like, what happened? Is this legal, or is this the way forward? Or
I would say there's a lot of people who were very bothered by that. It's really not the jurisdiction. So I believe what has happened is I believe all those charges were dismissed, if I'm not mistaken.
I've
So
seen there
Emily's
go
Still pending? Okay, so in any case, there is a judicial process that needs to play out, and it's really not the jurisdiction of the general court to kind of step into a criminal case. Having said that, I really don't, I was very disturbed by what I saw there that day. I mean, I was not there, I saw the video.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on her name right now, the one who said amen.
Oh, what was that? Was that Therese?
Therese, yes, Therese Grinnell, said very quietly, amen. And she was dragged out of there. And so I think it was a show of force, it was an overreaction, and I think it was inappropriate. Having said that, it's just not the jurisdiction of
It's outside of here.
the legislature to kind of step into specific cases like that.
So who would?
Um,
Is that like the district attorney?
the courts really. I mean, it's the courts, and you know, it's ultimately for them to make their case if they want to.
A lot of
Sort of
people have been
countersuit
showing up
false
at those
arrest.
trials
Yeah,
in
there's been
support
a
of the people.
pretty big outcry.
Yeah.
Don't you have the right to silently object?
That's in the Constitution, but these people were hauled out for doing it. They were arrested. Yeah. And when it happened, I thought, we should do something. This is our resident here in town. We should be speaking up. I don't know.
I'm trying not to get too outraged, but I was pretty angry, pretty upset.
I mean, if they were doing something wrong, I can see that, but not saying a word.
The whole circumstances around it, there was what, 130
Yeah,
people there, and there was 90 state troopers. in the
part
back.
of what happens at the previous executive council meeting had been disrupted, and so it was kind of as if they had expected more disruption, and they started to arrest people before there was any actual disruption. And so yeah, it was, in my view, highly inappropriate, really disturbing. I had one friend there who, you know, grabbed another friend of mine who was there and said, "Look, we got to get out of here now." And he said to me afterwards, he said, "This is one of the few times I have really been afraid of my government." And this person is a state representative. He's a good friend and somebody I've known a long time. And for him to say that, you know, he's not a person who's prone to hyperbole. It was, he meant it. And so I do find it disturbing.
Yeah,
And
and
I
they
think
caused a disruption.
And I think on some level, people just need to speak up and have their voices heard. So there have been a lot of people who've been following it and showing up and letting their voices be heard. And I think if that continues, that is actually the best way to come to a fair and just conclusion. Unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, the process is the punishment. And so they could dismiss everything, but you know, you've still gone through.
Oh
you know,
yeah,
pretty
and it
painful
takes
process.
Right.
Expense of
people's
hiring an attorney
and losing time from work.
Well, and I know
Is
somebody
there-
who's a mom who was put in handcuffs in front of her little girl, and that's got to leave a lasting impact on that little girl.
Oh sure.
So
Is there a way? And I'm not asking you guys guys to do it. However, if you received enough support, could the House censor the governor over this?
Good question.
Huh? And mics are very sensitive.
I don't know. I doubt very much in the current climate that we would have sufficient votes to do that.
Because it just seems like such a blatant violation of the Constitution. The right to peaceably assemble was, it was violated in my view. And of course, I'm not a lawyer and I wasn't there, but I saw the video. And it was, but yeah, there's no talk of that kind of action.
A lot of Constitution violations going on in this country right now.
But in our state house, I'm not state house, but up in Congress. So what can we do about these constitutional violations?
Well, we had one. So I had one bill passed in the last biennium, and it was essentially affirming that the Constitution still applies even during a state of emergency. And it sounds like it shouldn't be necessary to pass a bill that says that, but there was a Superior Court case when the Sununu administration was being sued over the right to peaceably assemble during COVID. The Superior Court judge actually wrote in his opinion, the governor does have the right to limit or suspend constitutional rights during a state of emergency. So I worked with a group, Cornerstone Family, there's Cornerstone Research and Cornerstone Action. Anyway, I worked with them to help hone the legal language in this bill, but basically that bill passed and was signed by the governor ultimately. I think he probably wasn't enthusiastic about it, but he was willing to sign it, and it said, essentially the same constitutional rights apply during a state of emergency, period. We don't mess with those just because we say it's an emergency. So
But there's
that
still
was
a
a
lot of
step
state
in the
of
right
emergency
direction.
reform.
We actually put the state of emergency reform into the budget because right now the law essentially says that if a governor declares a state of emergency and continues to extend it and extend it and extend it, nothing can stop the governor other than a majority of both houses of the legislature. So if you imagine a governor saying, I want to declare a state of emergency around gun violence, unless they had a majority in both houses to say we're ending the state of emergency, they could continue to do whatever they think is appropriate or necessary under that state of emergency. We just can't have that. So the provisions that were put into the budget, which will now go on to the Senate, essentially say, no, if the governor wants to extend the state of emergency, they have to get the affirmative permission of both houses of the legislature to do that.
Wasn't after 60 days, or wasn't there a time frame?
There is a time frame.
Yeah, I think that was 60 days, but.
So there are a lot of things. I mean, I think we've done a lot. We've done very well with Second Amendment bills this year. There were a lot of attempts to encroach on the Second Amendment.
Killed them.
We killed them all, and we've got some people on both sides of the aisle. I think the Republicans tend to be really solid on Second Amendment rights as a rule, but we've got people who are friendly to the Second Amendment on the other side of the aisle as well. And so we usually can do pretty well, and we hear from a lot of people, and we always like hearing from people. If they say, "Please don't mess with my gun rights." So,
And school choice was a big thing we've been working on. Education freedom accounts.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And that passed several years ago, right? Was it 2 years ago?
it was 2 years ago as part of the budget, actually. Yes.
Is that fully in place?
It is in place. A couple of issues or concerns. One of the issues is that there is an income And so what we just tried to do was to increase it to 3 times, actually 3.5 times or 5 times, there were 2 different proposals, the poverty level.
300%.
Yeah, so it's 300%
To
over
go
the
up to
poverty level. We
350.
just voted for 350% over the poverty level.
Yeah. And so, and there were some people who wanted to go for 500%.
Some of us
Basically-
preferred no cap.
Trying to expand the program, we also had a bill that was trying to expand it to include
Special
anybody with
needs
special
kids.
needs or people who'd been exposed to bullying, things like that, so that they would not have to qualify under that income cap. So Republicans were generally trying to expand options for school choice under that program. Democrat lawmakers brought some proposals to constrain it. For example, they wanted to require that a student go to a public school for a year before they would be eligible to go to the school of their choice under that program.
They also want public education to be in control of the funds, which we killed.
Right.
Oh,
And
so
then
who controls the funds then?
right now it's there's a, I'm trying to remember the name of the group, but it's
Yeah.
Kate Baker. I think it's called Education Choice. Kate Baker is the administrator or the executive director of that organization, but they essentially oversee those funds and distribute the funds to parents when the parents provide sort of backup for how they're spending the money on their child's
And so
education.
their eligible expenditures would be homeschool supplies or private school tuition or however
Mhm.
the parent is,
Right.
whatever direction they're moving.
Yes.
It's a success too. The kids are excelling academically through this program. It's a great thing, but it's under attack from the other side. So,
Yeah.
but I think we're doing a good job to protect it for the most part.
And
So does
then-
that money, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just asking if that money, so if you're giving a parent money for a student to be homeschooled or a private school or charter school or whatever it is, does that money get taken away from the public school system? Is that how that works? I don't know.
That's always been the argument, but in fact, there is what's called hold harmless funds. So I just finished a 3-year term on the Wilton Lineborough School Board, and that was one of the complaints that people had. And I actually looked into it and found that there were exactly 2 students who left the Wilton Lineborough School District to go to an EFA, an Education Freedom Account program. But the school actually didn't. I mean, the argument is, oh well, we're going to lose the
Right.
funding, but they actually don't.
Oh, good.
So there's a hold harmless funding that essentially has avoided that scenario. So you know,
So that's only from if they take advantage of that EFA, right? Is that what it's called?
I was
EFA,
under the impression that federal money
So-
still goes to the schools and state money doesn't,
no, state money goes to the schools as well.
even with EFA.
Yes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
For that
Okay.
student. That
Yes.
student still gets counted in the population. of
Essentially, yes.
All right,
Yes.
so they can't use that as an excuse of we're losing kids left and right,
Yeah.
and so we're losing funding.
And there is actually, so in the budget, there was also some change to the adequacy grant formula. And this is still proposed and it's estimated. But essentially this is the version that came with the budget that we passed last week. So in that, New Ipswich stands to gain about $300,000 in fiscal 2024 and about a little more than $300,000 in fiscal 2025. From about 3.6 million to about 3.9 million in 2024, and from about 3.6 to about 4.0
Wow.
in 2025. So that's not all towns are
Yeah.
affected
Oh,
that
yeah.
positively, but it's all, I know how it is to put together a school district budget, and it always seems like a lot of money, and it is, but it's also, as you start to look at where you can, what you
Right.
actually have control over, it's pretty challenging. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you experience the same thing on the town side.
Yeah.
So
Don't
every
spend it yet.
every bit, yeah, don't spend it
So-
yet. The Senate has to do their thing first.
So the schools get that money regardless of how many students are enrolled in it?
No, that's the adequacy grant, and that's part of the reason I said it's estimated, is because it's based on average daily, average daily,
Attendance.
yeah, I think it's ADM is the actual term, average daily membership, but it's average daily attendance essentially. So those are estimates based on sort of what is the
Gotcha.
ADM at each school.
So anybody who files for the Education Freedom
Account.
account
Mhm.
gets counted as
I don't-
average daily attendance.
I don't know
So
if they
that
get
whole
counted if they
account is-
never were at the public school. I'm not sure about that,
Yeah.
I would have to look into that.
But if somebody leaves, that pupil's remains.
The money stays,
As
the
a
whole
factor.
harmless funds basically kick in at that point,
Hmm.
yes.
So people afraid that it's gonna drain money from the schools are actually hurting themselves. Because if I'm homeschooling and I just pull my kids out, the state says, now you don't have X amount of kids in the school anymore, you're
Mhm.
getting less funding, whereas if they pull them out and file for this, now the state still counts them. Am I understanding that
Yep.
right?
Interesting.
So they're really shooting themselves in the foot by opposing it. In some sense.
I think so.
Cause.
I'll be honest though, like, if certain schools were to lose those funds, certain schools with certain things happening in those schools, I'd be totally okay with that. Because there's things happening in schools, not our schools, but there's things happening in some schools that shouldn't be happening, and I think if that were to happen, that would put them on check, so I'd be perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
We need to get control of some of those things.
We need competition.
Yes,
If
Yeah.
kids are going to better schools, maybe public schools should start doing a better job.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. What else? There's expanded Medicaid.
That's coming up.
Expanded Medicaid.
Yeah.
So Medicaid expansion happened, like 10 years ago, I think, and
Is it that long ago?
it was, well, it was right after, yeah, it was more than that, because it was right
Jeez.
after Obamacare.
I'm getting old.
And so when that passed in New Hampshire, they put a sunset date on it. And at this point, it's generally thought that Medicaid, so essentially renewing Medicaid expansion and increasing rates, it's generally thought that that will pass. The main thing we're trying to do is at least put a sunset date on it again, because once you create these kind of perpetual entitlements, it's very hard to ever, rethink them or roll them back.
And they're expensive.
They're very expensive, and right now it's a 90% federal to 10% state. But we want to put a sunset on it, because if the federal government decides at some point that, well, it's going to be 10% federal and 90% state, well, that completely changes everything.
And they can
So-
do that at
Right, and so the budget included Medicaid, the budget that we passed and sent to the Senate included Medicaid expansion with a sunset date on it. And that was an attempt to sort of, stake out a negotiating position to say, we would like to see this have a sunset date. And the Senate has said, and the governor has said, that they don't want a sunset date, they want forever.
this is the new Medicaid.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson for me as a selectman. Careful what you adopt.
Mm.
Was that part in the amendment?
That was in the committee amendment.
Okay, oh, okay.
Yeah, there were so many amendments. It was hard for me to keep track of.
It's
Everything.
complicated.
It was complicated, but we didn't win a lot, and there was a lot of spending.
But we were successful in keeping the interest and dividends phase out acceleration in the budget that we passed as well. So 2 years ago, the budget included language that said the interest and dividends tax, which adversely affects elderly people because a lot of them are, they're invested in bonds and things that, sort of fixed income investments. So that is, 2 years ago, we passed legislation that said that we would phase that out over 5 years. What we put in the budget this time, and hopefully the Senate will agree, was to phase it out over the next 2 years. So it'll be gone a lot faster. And, that's an example of where, we would like it to be gone and sort of out of, at zero, with some time before there's a next election to potentially bring it back, because at that point you're bringing, it's kind of the reverse of the Medicaid expansion principle. If we get rid of it, they have to come in and affirmatively push for a new tax at that point. We want that tax to be gone.
So that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions out here?
I have a question about the Medicaid expansion.
Yes.
So, similar, at least federally, recently, whenever they passed, I think it was the Inflation Reduction Act. They expanded Medicare, I believe, and for those people that didn't read it, it was at the expense of benefits. And so the expansion, does it affect benefits?
It doesn't affect benefits. It's essentially, so Medicaid is for people who have very low income. The Medicaid expansion basically extended that to the working poor. Medicare, on the other hand, is really for everybody. So sort of once you reach age 65, you shift to Medicare, and there are a lot of different supplemental plans you can build with that. So I'm not really, so in the whole Medicaid expansion discussion, I'm not real familiar with what's been happening at the federal level with changes to Medicare. So, and it actually, the Medicaid expansion doesn't really impact anything around Medicare per se.
So whenever they apply, say for example, they estimate the charges, for example, does it affect the, I believe, I'm not sure what rate they're using, but if they're using a rate that's different from neighboring states, there's definitely limited care here in New Hampshire. I mean, even for us, we've had trouble finding a pediatrician. So if I'm just wondering, is it comparable? Are those rates that are done at the state level for the expanding of Medicaid, are they comparable to, say for example, Massachusetts?
I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. I do know that there also is a move to expand, to increase the rates, which is a different issue from Medicaid expansion. And I have to confess, I don't know a lot about that at the moment, but if, afterwards I can give you my card and I can look into it and get answers for you.
Definitely, thank you. I also had another question. You said you were working with the licensing professionals?
Yeah, we heard a lot of that in my committee.
Does that include teachers though?
I mean, essentially all licensing, but so.
Teachers are probably education.
Yeah, education. You're right.
Yours is more OPLC.
More,
related.
OPLC stuff. So occupational, so we did a lot of nursing stuff this year, because there's issues with nursing. I mean, they actually wanted to drop the LNA license too, which didn't go through, which would have made a lot of people unhappy. People, but there are some. It's a whole other issue, but there's a lot of nonsense happening within that.
Same thing with real estate licenses, a lot of people upset.
Well, the thing is with the LNAs is, so, if they're making $30 an hour, because there's such a shortage, all the hospitals and nursing homes are operating at like 75%, but they're required to have a certain amount of staff on board, so the hospitals are forced to go to a staffing agency, and the staffing agencies are charging upwards of $150 an hour for an LNA. And these LNAs are they're paying them, say, I'm not going to work for you if you pay me, unless you pay me $50 or $60 an hour. So they're getting paid $50 or $60 an hour, but the people that are on full time are only getting 25 or 30, and it's creating a morale issue. And then those people are leaving to go to staffing agencies. It's a whole mess, yeah. So, but I feel bad for those folks,
But there was nothing done with it really.
no, we're not dropping that license. But yeah, they tried to drop a lot of licenses. Actually, we heard one that was gonna drop the requirement for all trade licenses. You wouldn't receive a penalty if you hired somebody, or if somebody worked on your house and wasn't licensed, they wouldn't receive a penalty for doing so, as long as the homeowner knew that you didn't have a license. You can go and do that, which
Interesting.
Generally seems like this term, it's been a lot of reduction of licensing, which I
Yeah.
like.
There are some kind of crazy rules, like it actually takes considerably more classroom time to be a licensed hairstylist in New Hampshire than it is to become a certified EMT. I think it's like 10 times as many hours. It's crazy. Yep.
It doesn't seem right.
It does not seem right. There was a bill to license music therapists.
right, that was
And
on the committee as well.
This is in part because if they're licensed, then they can bill through insurance, and so there's some reasons why, but a group comes and says, well, we want to be licensed, or and for some kind of bureaucratic reason like that, and then it sort of gets into this protectionist scenario where I say, well, you can't you can't play music for your patient because you're practicing music therapy without a license.
What?
There are, and I've heard bills that were about sort of acupuncture and just sort of very, very limited, in the ear acupuncture that helps people with addiction problems. And the Board of Acupuncture is strongly opposed to this because, it would allow people who have a lesser level of training to provide that care. But we also heard from people who run addiction centers who say, this doesn't help everybody, but it helps some people, and so can't we do it? And so, my view, and I think I probably speak for all of us, is, can we just get the government out of the way? And, there's a common sense, there's a level of common sense that should apply, and unfortunately in a lot of cases it just doesn't, because people have special interests.
The licensing one, man, that got me like hundreds of emails from Wilton Temple and New Ipswich from realtors. That was they were you can have people come right over that border that's right down the road here and start selling our houses for us. And I heard from pretty much everybody down the road at Remax and everything, and it was like, don't worry, this is not going to go through. There's no way.
But and you're writing legal contracts and stuff. It's important.
Yeah.
But there were things like eyebrow threading, like
Right. Hair wash stations, that required, can we have like a hair wash and blow dry station and do your eyelashes without needing a license, and that makes sense,
And mine was animal chiropractic, allowing people to take their animals to a chiropractor without vet approval, vet referral. Got a lot of attention, which I was happy. I was surprised. I didn't think anybody would care about animals going to
You said
chiropractic.
that was your bill, or
Yeah, that's the one Melissa Ojala came to
Yes.
testify on.
did it and it passed?
by a lot. By a lot.
So
Because right now it's a kind of illegal.
it's a gray area, but the vet board was kind of anxious to require referrals. Problem is, it takes forever to get into a vet sometimes, and it's expensive. And then once you get in and you pay all that money, they might not want to refer it. And it's like, you can take your 2-year-old to a chiropractor without a doctor referral, but you need a vet to take your dog. It was ridiculous. So luckily that one passed. Because I take my dog to the chiropractor. Full confession.
So, and that's now on to the Senate, right?
Yes.
So it's got to go through the Senate and the governor.
And then the governor has to sign it. But it's another
But I think that'll do
government
well.
out of
Yeah,
the way.
definitely.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, we're all pretty big on that.
And now you had a bill earlier this year with
I've had
something to do
4 or 5.
Okay.
So several of them are vaccine related. We had a couple of incidents of children, a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old, vaccinated at school without their parents' consent.
Is this for
And
the
in-
COVID vax?
actually, these were flu, although I know of a guy in a family in Brattleboro, Vermont, where a 6-year-old came home and had been vaccinated with the COVID vaccine, and they had specifically been asked, you know, do you want to get your son vaccinated, because the schools in Vermont get money if they get to a certain percentage of vaccinated students, and the father said absolutely not. And he came home with someone else's name tag on and someone else's vaccine card with the same name and a short arm. So that one is still pending in court. The court dismissed it because federal law, the PrEP Act, essentially says nobody's accountable for anything. So
That face, that's exactly how I feel.
So my bill,
Nope.
and in one of the two cases, I don't think I still have it, but in one of those two cases, I do have it. I have the form. This is a copy of the form. This is the consent form, and on one side it says my daughter's name. It's blacked out, so there's no private information here. But so, will not be getting this shot, please. I do not consent. And she never signed the form. And then on the other side, she just said no in big letters with an exclamation point. They vaccinated that child at Birch Hill Elementary School in Nashua. So my bill basically said, don't run vaccine clinics during school hours. And that got tabled, so it's unlikely to come back this term. But you know, we did get some exposure in the Union Leader. Kevin Landergan put a front page article in for us on that. So, you know, that was one of my bills. I have another bill that addresses,
Can't
this-
even
this-
tell you how livid I would be.
this gets
I'd
kind of
explode.
deep into the weeds of, you know, but the legislature makes laws, which we call statute, but the legislature also delegates lawmaking authority to executive branch by saying the commissioner of such and such shall make rules about the following. And so one of those areas of statute says the Commissioner of Health and Human Services shall make rules about foster family requirements. So, and then the rules that they created said, well, the foster families have to be vaccinated with the entire schedule of recommended vaccines from the CDC. Well, the CDC just added the COVID vaccine to its recommended vaccines for children, which means that in essence, if you are a foster family household with a foster child 6 and under or with special medical needs, you have to get all of those vaccines, including the COVID vaccine. So my bill is it passed on unanimous consent through the House and is being heard in the Senate tomorrow. And that would essentially say they're not subject to any requirements other than the same requirements everybody else in the state is. And they are allowed the religious exemption, because right now they're not allowed a religious exemption, which is just a complete violation of people's rights.
Right.
So
Meanwhile,
those are
the
two.
truth is coming out about this vaccine, so.
And then I have one that was about biological sex and basically saying, you know, if the boys want to go in the girls' room at school or the girls' locker room, we want to essentially assert that the school districts know, yes, you can distinguish based on biological sex. And
Like
for some reason, yeah, and I appreciate you co-sponsoring it. That, for some reason, that was that's a highly controversial bill. We got, I sat through 3 hours of hearing people talk about, how horrible this was and how horrible I was for bringing it forward. But
I could not.
But we heard from one mother in Milford, and it made the whole thing worthwhile, because she herself was a victim of sexual abuse, and all she wants to do at this point is protect her 12-year-old daughter, who is now being harassed by a boy who has a girlfriend but says that he's a girl and is going in the locker room. And so things have just gotten out of hand. This bill would simply say, you don't have to be afraid of being sued if you're a school superintendent and you say, nope,
Right.
you can't go in there. So it would affect schools, prisons, and sports. So it would sort of give
Now,
schools the right to say that, yeah,
So
you know, the
depending on
girls are
which
gonna
parts
compete
you're
against the
born
girls.
with, you go to that appropriate.
Well, or the schools could decide. I mean, even, you know, if the school says, well, for, you know, sixth grade and you're doing intramural sports, that's okay, but if you're competing for an athletic scholarship and you're trying to win the state championship, you know, you shouldn't have to compete. So it would be up to the schools and the
Yeah.
athletic associations to make the detailed rules there. But right now, there's this fear that they're gonna be sued if they don't, you know,
so
follow
how
the
does
line.
the law read now? Like,
Well,
why would you have to make a bill
Our
like this?
position is that the law does allow that now. The problem is that there are some, including the Attorney General's office, arguing the contrary. They're basically saying, nope, you have to acknowledge a person's chosen gender as opposed to their biological sex. So there's confusion. It's, I guess, ambiguity is what I would say. And so this bill was intended to clear up the ambiguity. And so that was, and I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, it's
I really
great.
appreciate
But
it.
those
These
were
are issues that
three.
really
Those
are-
were three, and so a lot of these you get into really deep into the weeds of what's in the law today, what's an administrative rule, what's possible or practical. How do you, and what can you get 201 people to agree with you on and vote yes on, and then, you know, hopefully get, you know, half of the Senate, at least a majority of the Senate to agree as well. It's a long, slow process, and, you know, a great percentage of these bills die, and a great many of them should die. But there's some that die that, unfortunately, that, you know, they would be doing some really good things, but
And then, and if it does die, you can't introduce it again next year.
correct. That actually, the one on biological sex was actually retained, and that is a sort of a legislative maneuver that happens in committee, and it says, well, we're gonna think about this for a while. So that one actually has to come back next year because they can't get rid of it. They can only kind of put it on temporary hold, and that's what they've done. So we'll keep pressing on that one because I think it's going to become more and more of an issue.
Right.
And, you know, my philosophy is kind of how can we figure out how to live together, you know, as a
Right.
civil society, and
That'd be cool.
you know, it would be nice, but you know, it's clear with what's happened in Milford and elsewhere that things are just they've gone overboard, and we need to.
We have a mental health issue and a societal issue. I mean, when you have kitty litter boxes in bathrooms, we've gone too far. It's a societal issue,
Don't
and
get it
it's
going.
bringing on mental illness.
I'm gonna have to leave.
No, I agree, and
Yeah.
I think I saw that in the news, how that bill just barely didn't make it.
Right.
It was disappointing, and I think it is in my mind, it's a liability for these organizations who are allowing this to happen, that eventually, like this Milford mother's fears are gonna come true,
Yeah.
and it's not good.
Well, she was a superstar. I mean, she just put it all out there, and it was very emotional testimony, and it made the whole thing worthwhile. And I think she got some national attention on that as well. I mean, it's a very moving video if you go back and watch that section of the hearing. I think Cornerstone has posted that on their website.
When the sickness first started, allowing boys and girls to go in the same bathroom, there was a 17-year-old transgender boy, born a boy, who entered into a bathroom as he was allowed to, and there was a 12-year-old girl in there, and he raped her in a naughty spot. And I won't even get into that, but that's horrible. And still the fad continued and became, you know, incentivized and it just continued to grow and become the thing.
So odd how 200 years ago we just didn't have this problem with people born the wrong gender all the time.
I don't know.
So you do occasionally dip your toes into the muddy waters, huh? Gotta get your
Somebody's
hands,
got to.
Yeah.
roll up your sleeves,
Mm.
and that's encouraging to hear.
Now's the time. More than ever.
It's pastime.
Yes.
We've gotta just do what we gotta do.
So a lot of people I talk to will say, beyond hope. Time to duck and cover.
Some places it probably is, California or New York City, wherever, but it's, hopefully there's hope for New Hampshire still.
That's what I try to answer. But it requires doing something with it.
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
and putting your head up, I'm sure you had a few rocks chucked at you that day. You said at the hearing there was a lot of,
people who don't like me for it, and I don't dislike them in return. It's just, you know, they're coming from a particular point of view, and
you know,
okay.
This is what I don't understand. How can a group of people preach tolerance and acceptance and all of that stuff, but as long as you agree with them. But if you don't agree with them, then you're the person who's wrong. And there is no tolerance and no acceptance. Why can't you just agree to disagree? You have your view, I have my view, and let's be friends. Like, but this whole country is so
There are some
divided.
issues about which we can't just agree to disagree. There are certain
Yeah.
laws and rules.
Oh
that
yeah,
we
no,
have.
and I agree with that. Yeah,
So-
but some of the stuff, but it's the small beginnings of that stuff that just blew up, and now it's just scary.
You guys are much better about agreeing to disagree and staying calm than I am. Jim's very patient.
Yeah, I guess I want to follow up on what you said about hopelessness, because to me, I often say, well, I just do what I'm instructed to do. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in the world right now, okay? And I'm not the one in charge. So, you know, if God is in charge, and my job is like, go do that, there's a certain level, there's a certain point at which I say, okay, well, my job isn't to be concerned with the outcome. I mean, I want a good outcome, and my job is to fight for that outcome, but ultimately, it's not my decision, right? So I think whether you feel hopeless or not, you just have to kind of do, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I think, you know, the nice thing about New Hampshire is we have a citizen legislature. We make $100 a year for a job that, you know, I have not figured out my hourly rate, but it's I'm sure it's well under 10 cents an hour. Okay, it's a volunteer job, and people come to it because they care, and that's people on both sides of the aisle. They see the world through a different lens, okay, and I disagree with some of them very strongly, but pretty much everybody is coming to that role because they care and they want to make a difference in the world. So, you know, I feel like people need to be involved. I mean, the parental rights bill is a good example. Is you know, the education committee is getting emails that are kind of 3-1 approximately against the parental bill of rights, because there's a you know, the LGBT community is just very, very concerned that, you know, they don't like, you know, parents being notified if something is going on with their kid that maybe they should be aware of. So there's a strong opposition. They're highly, highly motivated, and it's about 3-1 against. Whereas I think a lot of people, they're trying to lead their lives. They got families, they got jobs, they're trying to pay a mortgage, and so they don't necessarily engage in these things on a routine basis. The 18th of April, 1 week from today, is the House Education Committee hearing on the Parental Bill of Rights. There will be a rally in the morning on the steps of the State House in support of the Parental Bill of Rights. If you can't be at the rally, or basically anybody can come testify. That'll be held a little bit later in the day. I think it's 10 o'clock that morning. If you can't come testify, send an email to the House Education Committee. You go on just do a search for General Court New Hampshire, and you'll get the General Court website, and you can navigate to how to find the Education Committee and send an email to the Education Committee and say, please support the Parental Bill of Rights. On the day of the hearing, you can go to the same website and you can sign in to support the bill. But these lawmakers need to hear from you, and I think that this is probably going to be split along party lines. It usually is, but it's helpful. It gives people a little more strength and fortitude when they hear loud and clear that there's people out there who care very, very deeply about parental rights, and to sort of reestablish some trust between the schools and the parents, and that's important. And if we turn our backs on that and decide that it's not important, then our schools will continue to go in the wrong direction.
Can you even fathom that there's lawmakers that'll be like, how dare you think that you have rights as a parent
I was just gonna
to know
say,
what's happening with your child? How
You need
dare
to
you?
just pop
isn't
them out
that
and
kind
hand
of
them
a
over to the government
God-given
at birth.
right that when you become a parent, you have rights over that child to make decisions for them until they're capable of making a decision for themselves? Like,
That's
why do
your
we have to have a
responsibility.
law? Right. Why do we have to have a law that says you have the right?
But it matters if people email, because
Yeah.
Yes, it
I've
does.
done a lot of emailing in the last 3 years, and I start to feel like this is just going into the wind.
Emails are
Into
important,
the
but I
wind.
think showing up is even better.
Even better.
It's
They
better.
wouldn't want
But I
to
promise you, I read all my emails and I get a lot. I get a lot of emails on all kinds of different topics. I read every single one of them.
I do, but the ones that go to committee, so often in our committee we hear, we got 30 emails for and 14 against or whatever, but it
Right.
doesn't have the
You'll
same
hear the
impact
numbers.
as
Right.
showing up.
So even if somebody emails, it makes its way to the desk of the committee, or
Yeah, it
in
does.
some way.
It does,
in one
but
way
showing
or
up has
another.
more impact.
Yeah, if you send it to the right place,
Yeah, that's-
or to the right person. Some reps won't bring it to their chairperson of the committee, but if you send
Yeah.
it to that committee, if you go on to sales and put that committee in there,
Yeah.
it'll get sent to everybody, including the chair. That's the best way to do it.
Mr. Gofel, I have a question. Is there anybody lobbying against the parental rights?
Yes. So it's generally the LGBT community.
Don't forget the
The-
kids.
Q
the
plus.
Teachers, the teachers unions tend to be opposed to it. And then groups like the ACLU also opposed to it. And again, the stated concern is that if a child goes to a trusted adult in school and says, well, I think, I'm not sure about my gender or something like this, that adult is going to be obligated to turn around and tell the parents. What the Parental Bill of Rights is actually pretty specific. It says that if there's an implementation of a school policy, like the school's going to implement the policy that we're going to start treating this boy as a girl, if that, then the school is essentially aiding and transitioning that child. That would be something under the Parental Bill of Rights that needs to be reported to the parents. And I have to look further at the Senate version. I believe it was an earlier version of the House bill that said, well, they don't have to tell you, but if you ask, they have to give you a truthful answer. And then the one we tried to pass said, no, they have to tell you. So those are the groups that are primarily opposed to it.
The example we use is if a student says, I'm confused, and I'm feeling this way, that way to the teacher, but I can't tell my dad because he'll kill me. The parents like, oh, your dad's gonna kill you? And they ride that wave.
Yeah.
And it's foolish. It's a figure of speech. And
Well, Ray Buckley, who is the chair of the Democrat Party in New Hampshire, actually said, if this bill passes, there are parents who will beat their children to death. I mean, that's the argument, and I'm not sure what to even say about that. I think there's a presumption there that parents don't love their children and that they can't get through difficult conversations with their children.
But a government agency would love them.
Well, only if you think a certain way, I would assume.
Right.
If you're already thinking like them, I don't think there would be much trouble letting the parent know.
Right.
And yeah, that's important because I'm a teacher and it's things are very different up here in New Hampshire than they are in Texas.
Yes.
Yep. I lived in Texas. I lived in San Antonio for a while.
Alright, well, I appreciate you guys coming in and don't wanna take up too much of your time.
I know you get an early day tomorrow.
So I will say that people should not feel any hesitation to reach out to us. If you have, you don't have to agree with me. If you disagree with everything I said tonight, you can still call me and I'll talk to you.
Mhm.
And, we are, we are your representatives and we need to hear from people. So
Absolutely.
absolutely welcome people to reach out to us. Our contact information for all of us is on the general court website. Emails and phone numbers, and reach out.
And that, I've talked with Shane a little bit throughout this session, and I've heard how many people don't show up,
Yeah.
and I'm just so happy to hear that you guys are there.
Yeah, has any of us missed a session ever?
Mhm.
I've
No,
never.
well,
That's just,
That's awesome.
it means a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's especially important this time around.
Right.
And bills will pass or fail based on who's showing up,
Numbers.
and it's critical.
It's frustrating to me, and I told you, I did not run for office, and I did not let these people vote for me to not show up and do the job that they voted for me to do. I absolutely not, would never do that. And that just, it's absurd that some of these people, and there are some people with some illnesses and that haven't been able to make it because of that. But then there's some that just don't care as
You
much
get some
as
people
we
who
do.
have to leave early for band practice.
Yeah,
So.
Yeah. Is there anything you guys, if you feel like something important is coming up that you want to come to a selectmen's meeting or whatever, and because, the TV thing and the whole thing that you'd like to, feel free to reach out to us as well. And,
Mhm.
you guys could come in and talk about whatever it is that, not that everything isn't important, but if there's something particularly,
That you think is of interest
Yeah.
to, especially the dining.
Personally, I would love to do this regularly.
Yeah.
I think if we did this every 3 months,
Okay.
That would be
be because we get really busy starting in January. So we have kind of our first session in January, and then we get into committee hearings where it depends on which committee. If Health and Human Services is really busy, for example. I'm also on Fish and Game, which had one House bill this time, so it was
I was gonna say,
it
fishing
was an
game
easy
isn't the
one.
place to be if you don't want to do much.
But we get into bill hearings, we stay pretty busy up until crossover, and then we've got Senate bills, and there are fewer of those, and so it slows down a little bit,
right,
and then we kind of work through the end of June, and we're done. So it's helpful based on sort of how we want to work out a schedule. It's helpful to kind of understand how
Right.
what the year looks like
Calendar looks
for the House. Again, I think it's September, October is when we would have to file legislation for next year. So, it might be helpful as a future point to kind of capture what are the things that make it really difficult? What are the red tape issues that you run into in,
yeah.
in running the town?
Do you wanna come back in July and then
I was
maybe
gonna say, the
get some
conclusion of
ideas?
the-
Yeah.
Right, I think that would
Towards
probably
the end
work
of
well.
July.
yeah, the conclusion, and then that'll bring us right to, like Jim said, September, so.
So we go for the 18th?
July 18th?
Tuesday.
Yeah, we
Always
always
a
meet on
Tuesday.
Is anyone on? Would you all be available vacations planned for that time? Yeah.
Nope.
Does the
Ooh,
7 o'clock
okay.
time frame work for you guys, or would 6 be better, or
This works fine.
7?
I don't know how it, I mean, so you met at 5, I don't know if it's, like, if you had a too long a time in between, or if,
It just worked
We
out
never
that
know.
way. We're
Okay.
we have to be
It's-
very flexible here.
Yeah,
okay.
So,
Yeah. we had a
it
couple of
worked
things
out.
that
We had
cancel, and,
Yeah, we had an hour and a half
yeah,
in between, but
which is
other
fine.
times it may be chock full right up. to
Yeah,
the
exactly.
times.
And you might be waiting on us.
Well, I don't know if we would.
Not necessarily that bad,
Yeah.
but
If it's a quarterly thing, I
Yeah.
think we can push things up.
all right, I'll send like the Outlook email invitation thing, and as it gets closer, we can, you know, if it's just looking like it's not gonna work for you guys or whatever, we can
Okay.
reschedule, but
Yeah.
that would be great.
And it would be nice to have it posted on our, on the website even, just like, you know how we
Not just
have,
the agenda, something,
yeah, have it
yeah,
as a
join
notice,
your
like,
state reps, yeah,
you know, your state reps will be at the town office.
right,
That would be a good,
instead of just, cause nobody ever looks at the agendas,
yeah.
yeah,
I
see.
think we talked about it, I don't wanna speak for them, but I thought it would be a good idea that after session was over to throw some kind of like we did before the election, to say, throw something to invite people to come in and,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
meet with
Yeah.
us and have some food, you know, and just, you know,
cool,
appreciation type of thing. And,
oh,
alright, we like
having a
food,
cookout,
yeah, something like that, or, you know, we'll talk about it.
yeah, that sounds good, yeah.
But definitely something like that, so people can come in and we can, more a casual type of thing, and we can just, you know,
Yeah.
just chat and.
And
some
not be
food.
on live TV.
yeah,
No, that
Just
sounds
not-
really good.
Not the week of the 19th through the 24th.
That's
is it?
June, where you need
Yeah.
to book to July.
Yeah, so, yeah, July for this one, but if we're having to get together, just not.
Mm.
Oh,
Oh.
no, it would probably be after the session ends on June 30th, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you guys,
Yeah.
you're open to doing this because I feel like it's important for the community even, you know, that
definitely,
there's so much anxiety and stress out there right now for people to understand what's going on, and that I think it's helpful. Yeah. Good.
thank you so much,
Great.
appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you so much for inviting us, really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right.
Yay.
Lou, motion to adjourn?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for tuning in. And now you can mill about outside. Start your barbecue.
I know, light up the Blackstone, I'm gonna tell ya,
Yeah.
we got a Blackstone, I love that thing.
Oh,
That's what I've heard.
great.
Oh, so good.
Thank you so much for coming in, all of the planning board. That's, quite enlightening. Thank you. Here, they're planning pages that you've seen with
Thank
you.
you.
Do you guys have a committee now?
I've
Oh,
got
wow.
human services tomorrow.
I got a committee,
Thanks,
so-
John.
I didn't think I did, but I do, and then I have subcommittee, Carol, normally I don't do